I wasn't sure you connected to that also.
I call the meeting to order. If everyone would please stand and join me for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. And Lori, if we could have roll call.
Sure. Renee? Here. Nola? Here. Lee?
Here.
Harry?
Here.
Gerald?
Here.
Lori? Here. Jeffrey?
Here. We do have the mics live, and we've set up the sound, so it works pretty well for the recording. Of course, our Chief Stiles, the fire chief, he is a multi-tool, and he helped me with it, and it's working pretty well. We also have a microphone set up at the lectern when we do public comments, and if you could use it, you'll definitely be heard better, so I would appreciate it. For this meeting, it's a special meeting, so there is one thing on the agenda, and that is the marijuana ordinance to adjust the general ordinances to come into alignment with the zoning ordinance, which we passed in our last meeting. As for conduct, I've mentioned this previously in meetings, of course, but they've been online, in that in our working sessions, I'll allow a bit more discussion and slight disordering so we can fully have that open discussion, but when we are doing business, I would like it to be more structured and addresses to come more directly to me, more in alignment with Robert's Rules of Order. So in this, we do have a public comment both before and after with the board gets done discussing the marijuana ordinance. If anyone would like to come up and make a public comment, you can do so now. All right, seeing none, there will be a time afterwards as well. So in these packets, obviously we had various concerns and discussions over which direction we should go on this. A few different versions have been included. Jim Scales, the lawyer, is here to answer any questions that anyone might have. We have a version that has the board addressing things rather than going through the clerk. We have a version where the item number 5 is addressed more specifically on limited versus non-limited facilities. And we also have one where the ordinance from zoning, and this was done in the township, was copied over to more explicitly lay out and address that item number 5. So that's just more in alignment with that. Obviously, there can be separate discussions over each version of these, and depending on which way people would like to go. Would anyone like to start the discussion?
Well, I like the version that the attorney did draw up on, what was this one? It says version 2 board approval. It addresses 2 out of the 3 items that we spoke about last Monday. Appreciate the updates on that. But with this being said, the second item, because this is a unique business, this is not a normal retail store or barber shop or anything like that, this is still a Class A drug under federal law. Therefore, we should look at this in that way. This is unique. This is not something that we should just arbitrarily say, go ahead, you go out and buy that property, and this guy comes on and says, well, I'm going to lease it, and then he starts committing a crime while he's leasing it. Now, he loses his business license, he's kicked out, but there's nothing confiscated because he's just a leasee. I think the language in this needs to address that more because, like I said, this is still a federal crime. It's not legal according to federal laws. So we should address that in such a state, because this does not apply to, like I said, a barber shop. They're not recognized as illegal, or a retail store or anything like that. So that's why I made that recommendation last Monday, because we're looking out for the township. I know it's this law. I know we have time constraints. It's got to be done by the 23rd. But I think that is a major issue. Is there a reason why that wasn't addressed?
Yes. So the reason that it wasn't addressed is because, so I talked it over with Jim on this, and we knew we would be on shaky ground trying to ban the ability to lease commercial, because it is such a common thing in the industry, in business industry, and we would probably be on shakier legal grounds on that than anything else, as far as I can tell. So that's specifically why I didn't want to address it. Did you have a comment on that, Jim?
Yeah, you are allowed to pass ordinances as long as they don't have a so-called unnecessarily impractical effect.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a limitation. Also, to go to your point about the building owner, under the state law, there are immunities from certain types of prosecution, and one against is a person who is leasing or otherwise allowing the use of property owned, occupied, or managed for activities used by the law. So at least the building owner would be protected under state law. Now, we really can't affect how the federal government might decide or not decide to enforce their laws. So far, they have not enforced, the federal laws against state operators that are operating off of interstate law, but there's no guarantee that's going to continue.
So I got a question about that too. It's like, what if all of a sudden the federal law starts to enforce it? What happens to us as a township by allowing this to be in our township? Is there any repercussions in the future that you can foresee of that would get us in trouble on the federal level?
You know, that was a concern when the very first law was adopted, but that seems not to have been a big concern since then. I mean, you're acting lawfully, you're permitting something that's permitted by state law, acting in accordance with state law. And so I would not be concerned as a township board member or official that you be responsible for a violation of federal law by
It seems to me to be a constitutional issue with states' rights that's come out on the one side. Would that be a reasonable take?
To be honest with you, it's probably, the federal supremacy probably would rule on it. But through, I think, 3 different administrations, the Department of Justice has decided not to prosecute people under federal law to comply with state law.
All right. Good. Other questions, thoughts, comments, concerns?
Well, one concern I have is I understand where you're concerned about leasing property, but if we try to regulate facilities that are going to do retail or provisional sales of marijuana, that's going to open us up to a discrimination suit faster than anything else that we could ever do with this marijuana, because we're discriminating against them specifically We don't hold any other retail person, whatever, barber shop, whatever, under any kind of scrutiny. If somebody owns a building and they want to lease it to somebody that's going to open a business, they're allowed to do it in our township. If you say you're allowed to do it except for, then we come under fire for discriminating against these specific businesses. And I'm telling you, if you want something to jump on, they're going to jump on the discrimination big time.
Okay.
That would be just like saying you can't lease, we can't tell people you can only do this because you're opening this business. But we don't hold anybody else accountable for anything. If we had a blanket zoning that said, okay, you cannot lease a building to any other business, then we might get away with it. But at this point, no.
Okay.
Am I thinking wrongly in that? I mean,
No, it's exactly
I've consulted
right.
with other people about this, so.
Under zoning, putting aside this, you really can't prohibit otherwise lawful use because they're on leased premises versus owned premises.
And yeah, I did do some consulting with other people at the state level, because it is in the state. If you look at the regulation for these facilities with the state, they don't prohibit anybody from leasing property, but they do have to make sure that they follow some strict guidelines. So.
Good.
That's what
Other
I'm here.
comments? So far, they've been on the lease versus owner thing, so does anyone have any other comments or questions on the lease versus owner specifically? What about, so there were two other sections, so I think probably the easiest one is the clarifying the different facilities, and there's two different directions that are included here. The one that Jim wrote up where it deletes the other facilities, the Part 5. And then the one that Lori put on there where it specifically spells them out. So they're basically two different directions to go. To very specifically spell them out, or to eliminate the part where you could have a misinterpretation, a contradiction in whether there were unlimited facilities or not. Because the provisionary are limited to 4 and the other ones aren't. Are there any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments on that part?
Well, the reason why I did what I did was because there was a question about you felt it was too ambiguous and you weren't specific enough. So I went to the zoning that we actually passed, and I took that section and I brought it right into this one where it says 2 provisioning centers or retailers on the M120 corridor and 2 on the Wet Hall Road corridor in C2. That's very specific, and that's what we've passed, that's what exists. And then any other, and then I went in to list the other ones where, like the safety compliance facilities, processors, Class A doors, or secure transporters, in the zoning that we've already passed, that is unlimited, as long as they're meeting the zoning criteria for where they want to open these.
Right, and I didn't like that part. I didn't think that works really good for me.
Because and I thought, well, maybe, that's, and that way, if somebody is looking at this, wanting to open any one of these facilities, there's no question to them.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I want to clarify,
Yeah.
to make sure that we're not going in some
Oh, no,
ambiguous
no,
directions.
no.
When you spell it out perfectly there.
No.
Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns about that part? Clarifying the facilities. Did you have something, Jim?
There was one thing I noticed between when the zoning ordinance was first presented to the township
Yep.
and when it was adopted, it looked like processors were taken out of the list of permitted
They're not. No, they're there.
They're in there.
They're there.
Go there.
Right there,
in
please.
the zoning ordinance.
Yep.
Right.
Mhm. They are in the processors, yep. Yeah, they're in the zoning.
Okay, I just didn't.
We did have I don't know if you have, we did have a couple of those floating around before they actually went to the board in February, but in processing may not have been in the one you have, but they are listed in the zoning.
Okay, in the industrial district.
Yes.
And the next one was on the processing. So I know what was attempted in this ordinance is that the process is non-discretionary, so that they have to use the colloquial phrase, they have to have their ducks in a row at the state level and with the place, the location that they're going to be using, so that it cuts down on our decision-making ability. And that way we can't have a list or a row of them, and we're not choosing between them which one we like or we don't like. Obviously, you can go immense different directions on that. But the idea is that if it was that subjective, that we got to pick and choose, that whoever didn't get picked would obviously come after us. So by making it non-discretionary and making it dependent on the state process, then it takes a lot of that decision-making onto them and their legality, and that way it's more objective, is the idea. And so we could go in two different directions here. We have one, that process going through the clerk, the way it's originally drawn up. Another one is going through the board. I mean, we can go either way on this, and it's also, I mean, that's part of a larger discussion about how much should go through the board. I mean, at this point, we are up to meeting twice a month. I would like to not be meeting more than that personally, and I've got the planning commission up to meeting twice a month themselves. But I would like to not blow that processing up to this huge amount. But nevertheless, questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns on that part.
My thing is I think it would be good to just go through the clerk, just because she's gonna be attentive to the dates, she's gonna be attentive to the filing. And when the people are filing for that application, as long as they have full understanding of how this ordinance is written up, that look, if you've messed it up and you did it wrong, you know what, you're going back to the end of the line and there's nothing we can do about that. They have to really understand that part, or they're gonna blow it up against us.
Well, they can't, because the process is, and I've already, I will tell you, I've already handed out 3 application packets. There's the application, there's also a 9-page rules and regulations.
Okay.
And part of the rules and regulations are, if you do not meet the state criteria first, and you don't
Right.
meet our zoning, and you don't
Right.
meet our building, then you're done.
Forget it.
Yep, your application goes back.
Are these applications not supposed to be started until the 23rd of March?
No, I
They
can't
can't
take
be
them.
Oh, they can't take them.
I can't take them, but if they can
Well,
come
we've
and
had it
request them
quite-
They
from
come
me.
in and request, they.
And I told some of them, because there was one that was looking at doing a building from the ground up, I said, you're gonna wanna talk to zoning too, because
Right.
if you don't have your zoning, you don't have
Sounds
anything.
good, sounds good. That was just, that was my
Nope.
only thing, to make sure they
Nope.
knew.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
As long
all
as they know that they
basically,
know.
yeah, they know, exactly.
Good job, good job. Thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns on those two different options?
Get the phone to the clerk. So like if we get this set up for tomorrow, Otis on the state, you know, have them, have all their stuff in a row. Yeah, that'd be nice. Then otherwise you gotta get all of us up to speed on all that stuff. And just, it's a lot more, comes up the works.
Right. Yeah, and I know everyone's basically processing information as fast as they possibly can at this point. And it's a lot, so. Any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns on any of it, on anything? I know we included a lot because I wanted to include the different options, the different parts, the different advice we'd gotten. We got a message from Michigan State University on their opinion on a piece. And any questions on any of that?
I'm still very concerned, both as a trustee, but also as a resident, about a lot of the things that pop up about this. I still think it's a Pandora's box.
Yep.
I still think that this is gonna end up being litigation. I still think it's gonna cost the township thousands of dollars, and I'm very concerned. I just wanna make sure that that's on record. I can't vote yes.
Yeah, I think that's very reasonable. I think that's very reasonable.
I'm in that same category. I feel the same way.
All right, do we have anyone that wants to, and we'll have to clarify the motion because they're so close to different things. Oh, Lorraine, did you have something that you wanted to
Yes.
say?
Jim asked about processors,
Yep.
and Laura, you said it's in zoning ordinance. Can you tell me the section? I don't see it.
It's in the new one. It should be, I didn't bring it with me, but it should be in the same, about the same area as this one is, authorized marijuana facilities. I don't know what rank where that is.
You're talking about the zoning ordinance, right?
The one we passed in February.
It's not in mine,
It's not?
no.
All right.
And I don't know if that's something different from what Jim had proposed.
Let me go.
I just wanted to clarify because
Let me go get it real quick.
it's not in the ordinance I
Yeah,
have.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, but that's this, is that the one we just, is that from,
This one's dated March 10th. I see on page 3, the top, it says processor. But this- Yeah, that's the definition.
Yeah, Jim.
I don't want to forget, under the
Yeah.
passage ordinance, you also need to set the fees, which you can do by resolution.
that's the general, this is, you're talking about the building, this one now.
Come again?
There are fees for application and for the annual fee.
Okay,
I think about $5,000 for each one of those.
Okay.
This is where,
This should just be a motion and a vote on that.
Okay.
Processors. I just wanted to clarify because Jim had asked that question.
okay. I thought we had processes in there, so we can take them off. I can change that.
Good job, we already
No, yes it is, yes it is, right here,
That was good. That's good.
right there.
Yeah, yeah,
accepted.
you're right. Yep.
Grower, processor, provisioning center, safety, but only where they're, yeah.
In the zoning, you have growers, retail, safety, medical.
But it doesn't have a separate section for processors, and it should, because it's in here. Yeah. Because it's in here.
That's the description, but it's not listed.
Because it is in there, it's just it doesn't have a separate section like some of the other ones do.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure.
All right, and Jim did mention about setting the fees and that type of thing. We did pass a resolution at the last meeting a week ago. We just weren't able to get this one resolved, why we're having a special meeting now. Are there any other questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, concerns on any of it? So we want to clearly lay out which one of these we're doing because they are pretty close. We have a version 1 with the clerk going through the processing. And that one's from Jim, and he clarified section 5 in the way that he clarified it. We have version 2 from Jim that's through the board approval, same clarification. And then we have the other one, which is not marked with a version, but this is the one where Lori transferred over the wording from the zoning ordinance to this ordinance. So when we make a motion, we have to be clear on which one of these we're going with. And does anyone have a motion to make?
I make a motion to accept ordinance 2021-4 to amend chapter 13 of Dalton Township Code for state licensed marijuana facilities. Number 3, to reflect the zoning ordinance 2021-1 amendments adopted by the board on February 2021.
Do we have a support? Gerald supports. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none, we will go with a roll call vote.
Lori, yes. Gerald?
Yes.
Renee?
No,
Lee?
Yes.
Carrie?
No.
Nola?
No.
Jeffrey?
Yes. The motion passes. And at this point, we do have a second public comment section. If anyone would like to come up, and that mic is on. See none, last call. All right, does the board have any other comments they would like to make before we move to adjournment? Hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Support motion to adjourn.
Do I have a support?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.